This is a preview from a texture control masterclass. This is a Keratin Smoothing Treatment Touch-Up. She has 1.5 to 2 inches of new growth. There is so much misinformation on YouTube regarding keratin treatments on textured, black, afro, kinky hair, but we're here to set the record straight. We'll begin this session with the biology of our hair. We need to ensure that everyone has a basic understanding of exactly what hair is.
The surface is protected by scales. Each scale is made of a series of flat cells piled 5 or 6 deep to form an envelope that protects the hair from damage. Under this protective coating, we can see a rough interior. We have now reached the heart of the hair. The long shapes placed side by side are made up of keratin. Every cell contains several of these keratin tubes. The black spot is a pigment called melanin. Melanin is responsible for the color of hair. The small white spots were caused when the hair was prepared for the microscope. The black groove in the form of a Y marks the separation between 3 cells. Those rounded shapes inside each cell are spheres of protein fibers. The white flecks inside these spheres are made up of keratin rolled in a spiral. Even at this magnification, it's impossible to see the structure of keratin. Our microscope has reached its limits.
She has been wearing a keratin smoothing treatment for over 10 years, and she has 1.5 to 2 inches of new growth now. She wants her hair smooth, frizz-free, and straight, but with body because she has fine hair. The first fact we understand is that our hair is made of keratin fibers. Because of this keratin treatment product, its molecular size is small enough so that it penetrates into the cortex layer and we can temporarily or permanently rearrange the disulphide bonds. And we also add keratin. Keratin treatments should also be called amino acid building treatments because amino acids are the building blocks of keratin. There are many keratin treatment products and many application techniques. This product we're using is applied to damp hair. We've already applied it throughout her hair in 1/2 inch sections. You see how we're holding the comb at an angle. We're not scraping the teeth on the scalp. We don't want to irritate her scalp as we're spreading the keratin product throughout the hair. Her mid, back, and nape area are the coiliest and kinkiest. So I'm applying a little extra keratin around the back nape hairline and right in the center back. This is how you apply keratin. It doesn't matter if the technique allows for a dry application or a wet application. You apply it with small partings, 1/2 to 1/8 of an inch, actually, depending on the density of the hair. The thicker the hair is, the smaller the parts. What we're doing is we're combing the keratin solution through the hair. It doesn't matter if the keratin gets on the hair that has already had a keratin treatment because the keratin will only adhere to the damaged sites on the hair strand. Do you understand that? The keratin will only attach itself to the damaged sites on the hair strand. At the first shampoo and rinse, any excess keratin will simply rinse out. So you never have to worry about over-processing. With this keratin smoothing treatment, you dry the solution into the hair. We're using an ionic blow dryer and a special thermal round brush. Because each individual hair strand is fine and the density, that's how many hairs per square inch, is on the thin side, we're able to use large partings to process this keratin smoothing treatment. You see how I'm using the direct nozzle right on the hair and the brush? I can do this because this is a modern ionic infrared blow dryer, and modern ionic blow dryers allow us to manipulate and smooth all of the cuticle layers. Now, if you have a cheap old-fashioned hair dryer, you want to hold the hair dryer at least 2 inches away from the hair because you don't want to burn the cuticle layers. As a professional, what determines the finished style are your experience, your knowledge, and the professional tools you use. They don't sell professional tools at retail outlets. So what you get from Sally's or the Koreans or Marshalls, those are retail blow dryers and flat irons, and they just don't have the modern features that we need to work with modern products like these keratin treatments. Now, this ionic hair dryer that I'm using is engineered with far infrared technology, and this type of advanced hair dryer emits a negative ions, and these negative ions, they help smooth and seal all of the cuticle layers. The first step of a keratin smoothing treatment is to apply the product and comb through and distribute evenly. The second step of this keratin smoothing product is to dry the product into the hair. Now, keratin treatments do all kind of things. They can make the hair super silky straight, or they can simply elongate your natural curl and eliminate the frizz. Keratin treatments allow you to temporarily rearrange the disulphide bonds within the cortex layer, and then it nourishes and adds keratin that feeds the ionic bonds, and it simply surrounds the hair shaft with a protective protein layer. Now, our disulphide bonds that are located in the cortex layer, they are responsible for 1/3 of our hair's structural strength, and they are also responsible for the curl pattern. Yes, it's the disulphide bonds that are responsible for our curl pattern. Now, this is how you blow dry the hair for a modern blowout, a modern blow dry flat iron, and the application of a keratin treatment to textured curly kinky afro hair. Now, we've gone over the reformation of the hydrogen bonds in some of our other videos, and I'd like you to refer to that so that you'll better understand how we're using a rounded brush to create a C formation. We don't want the hair to be straight down at 0 elevation. We want to make sure her hair has body, and we're drying the body into the hair by reforming the hydrogen bonds along with temporarily breaking some disulphide bonds. Now, because keratin treatments add amino acids and they rebond the ionic linkages to fill in the damaged sites, you can see here that her hair is already smoother and shinier. That's because we're adding to and rearranging bonds instead of simply breaking them. It is because of the keratin product's molecular size. The product molecular size is so small that it's able to go through the cuticle layers into the cortex layer without any damage. It can deliver a payload. It can allow us to rearrange the disulphide bond and leave the cuticle layer smooth and calm and shiny without any damage. Now, with relaxers, what you're doing is you're permanently breaking the disulphide bonds. And with relaxers, once they break the bond, there is no coming back. Now, because keratin treatments add amino acids and they rebond the ionic linkages to fill in the damaged sites, you can see here that her hair is already smoother and shinier. That's because we're adding to and rearranging bonds instead of simply breaking them. I'm going to say it once again. Because of the small molecular size, keratin products can better penetrate into the hair's cortex layer, and they could either temporarily or permanently rearrange the disulphide bonds and add and build and nourish all of the other cells around it. The beauty of the keratin treatments are you can wrap with them, you can roller set with them, you can blow dry with it. It all depends on the type of keratin product you use. Now, there are 3 primary types of keratin products. There is a animal keratin, there is a vegetable keratin, and there's a scientifically CRISPR created chemical keratin that most mimics human hair keratin, and that's what we're using here in this keratin treatment. Keratin treatments have got a bad reputation on YouTube because the stylists that are reviewing the products, they really don't have enough experience to even know what type of keratin product they're using, let alone what techniques to use and how to analyze the client's hair and match the appropriate keratin smoothing product with the desired end result. Like I said, you can go super silky straight, or you can simply elongate the natural curl pattern and eliminate frizz. Now, what frizz is what the YouTubers are calling porosity. Now, nobody is born with porous hair. Porous hair equals frizzy hair. Porous hair means your cuticle layer is damaged. That means the epicuticle and the exocuticle layers are damaged. They were probably damaged from either detergent, shampoos, and hair products, or by overlapping No Lye Relaxers and by heat damage. Those 3 things is what causes porous hair or frizzy hair. No one is born with porous hair. Babies don't have porous hair. It's the damage to the cuticle layer that causes your hair to frizz. Relaxers contribute to the abraded hair shaft, whereas keratin treatments feed and add and nourish. Now, you can get hair that's damaged by keratin if the stylist uses heat that's inappropriate for the diameter and density of the hair, meaning the flat irons were too hot, the plates were not ceramic, the heat was not even, the plates were aluminum. You know, that's the difference between the cheap flat irons and the professional flat irons. Beyond the $200, it's the structure of the plates. It's the rounded edges so you don't get any snags and breaks. It's the even heat throughout the plate. So wherever you place the plates, the hair is heated evenly. Actually, what happens when you're using flat irons and heat is the heat vibrates between the plates. So what's most important is what is conducting the heat. In the olden days, they had aluminum curling irons, and now they have those beauty supply store aluminum pressing combs. Well, now we know scientifically that aluminum is not a good conductor of heat. Aluminum will burn your hair. It will burn the internal disulphide bond structures, and that's when you get heat damage. So with professional flat irons, you have, number one, a digital display so that you can control the heat. Some hair requires a lower setting for a keratin treatment. Some hair textures require a higher setting for the keratin treatment. So you have to be able to adjust the temperature for the hair as to not break the disulphide bonds. And that's what a lot of stylists on YouTube, they don't understand, that they have to adjust the heat for the hair's diameter and density. Otherwise, what they're doing is just heat damage. When you see those videos where they slide the flat iron through the hair and all that smoke comes out, well, what they're doing is they're melting the hair. They are permanently breaking disulphide bonds through the high heat, and that is going to distort the curl pattern, and the hair will just be completely frizzy. But keratin treatments are the solution because, like I said, keratin goes in and fills the abraded sites on each individual hair strand. It adds keratin. Like for a long time, for over 50 years, they've known that keratin was the solution for healthy hair. But in the past, they didn't have the modern technology. They didn't have the nanotechnology. They could not get the keratin molecule small enough to penetrate into the cortex layer. And now in the 21st century, they found a way to shrink the keratin molecules so that they can go into the hair cortex layer without any heat. What the heat is doing is temporarily rearranging the hydrogen and disulphide bonds. Now, the only other thing in the past that rearranged the disulphide bonds was a cold wave. Okay, relaxer straighteners, they just break the disulphide bonds. Cold waves actually rearrange the bonds into the shape of the rollers you use. Okay, and with the new modern keratin treatments, we can go in and we can temporarily rearrange the disulphide bonds. Cold waves and relaxer straighteners, they permanently break disulphide bonds. Keratin treatments can permanently or temporarily rearrange the disulphide bonds. It all depends on the type of keratin product you use and the amount of heat you use. Now, because keratin treatments are ionic treatments, we need ionic tools to process these treatments. The cheap blow dryers and the Marcel curling irons and the cast iron pressing combs or cheap aluminum pressing combs, all of those are not good conductors of heat for hair. It will cause the hair to break. That's why in the olden days, textured hair girls, it would seem like their hair wasn't growing. Well, first of all, it's curly, so you got to stretch it out to really see the real length. And the other thing is, most of the time, the ends would break off just as much as it would grow. Everybody here grows an average of a half an inch per month, right? So that's like six inches a year. So in order to maintain the desired style, you have to control the texture of coily hair, and you have to have the right haircut to support the finished hairstyle. I mean, you can't get a bob out of a shag haircut, right? So we begin with the standard classic 5-section panels, and we begin in the lower back and nape area. Now, it's typical in the mid-back area and the nape to be the most resistant, the coiliest, the kinkiest, the area that grows out the fastest. Now, this is something you also have to consider no matter what process, whether it's hair color, bleach, relaxer, cold wave, keratin. You have to keep the texture consistent. So it's when new growth meets processed hair that tension caused the hair to break. So it doesn't matter if it's a relaxer or if it's bleach or if keratin, when the textures are not even at the point the two textures meet, the hair is weakest and the hair will break off. So you've got to keep that new growth processed, whatever the midshaft and ends are. If the midshaft and ends are bushy, woolly, and textury, then that's how the new growth should be. If your ends are straight, then you need to maintain smooth new growth, smooth, straight new growth. So then you won't have any tension at the point where the new growth and the processed hair meets. Now, the Ionic blow dryer that gets up to at least 875 watts is what we need for the blow dry phase of the keratin treatments. So with the flat iron phase, the flat iron plates can be anywhere between 350 and 450 degrees. Now you got to think about it. A pizza cooks at 450 degrees. So do we really want to be cooking our hair at 450 degrees? The higher the heat, the straighter the hair. So if you use high heat on the flat iron, you will never get a curl, because what high heat does is it straightens the disulphide bonds. So first of all, you want to lower the temperature on your flat iron. Okay, the hair does not need that intense heat. Second of all, you need to hold the hair at an elevation that would support the finished style. You just don't hold the hair straight down and just flat iron it straight down and think you're going to have a hairstyle with a volume. That's why I have the diagram laid on top of everything, even when you blow dry. When you blow dry, when you cut, when you flat iron, when you add curls, you're always adjusting for elevation. It's elevation that determines how the hair is going to fall. Now, the type of flat iron you need is a far infrared and negative ionic technology. You need that type of flat iron to decrease the styling time and eliminate the frizz for healthy, shiny results with every glide. For processing the keratin treatment, now you want to work in small sections. You want to work in 1 to 2 inch sections at the root. Now, this is a keratin smoothing treatment touch-up. So we're primarily focused on smoothing the new growth. The mid shaft and end are just being reformed into a fuller bob with more body. Now we've lowered the heat so that we don't permanently break the disulphide bonds within the cortex layer. For fine to medium hair, use 1 to 2 inch sections when you're flat ironing. For thick, coarse, curly, or wavy hair, use 1/2 to 1 inch sections. And you can go over the hair, you can do up to 10 passes, depending on the diameter of each individual hair shaft and the density, how many hairs per square inch, and the finish style. Does she want a super silky straight, or does she simply want to elongate the curl pattern? This client wants smooth with body and movement. So to straighten the hair with the flat iron, you want to hold the flat iron horizontally and you want to slowly glide it down each section from roots to end. You can go back with a second pass to make sure the midshaft and ends are smooth. Actually, the purpose of a flat iron is to smooth and polish the hair shaft. That's what it's made for. What's really happening during the keratin smoothing treatment is we're fusing keratin into the hair. Now, they've known for over 50 years that keratin was the answer, right, for rebuilding and reconditioning the hair. But in the past, the molecules were just too big to penetrate the cuticle layer and get into the cortex and make a difference. But now, in the 21st century, we've got nanotechnology, and they have shrunk the size of the keratin molecules so they can go into the cuticle layer and carry a payload of conditioners and leave the cuticle layer healthier and smoother and flat so it reflects light. Now we know that the hair is primarily made of keratin fibers, and it's the disulphide bonds that determine our curl pattern. Old-fashioned No Lye Relaxers go in and break the disulphide bond, and when they leave the hair, they leave the cuticle layer rough, abraded, and damaged. That's why stylists use all of those gels and foams and mousses and wax. They're trying to smooth the cuticle layer. So now that we've nourished the hair with keratin and left a protective glaze around every single hair shaft, What we have to do now is make sure the keratin stays a protective element around each and every hair strand. And the way you do that is with sulfate-free shampoo. You can't use the same hair care products that you use with relaxers. You can't use the same hair care products that you use on natural hair. And just because the products at retail level say they're sulfate-free, it doesn't mean they're sulfate-free. But with professional products, when they say it's sulfate-free, it is. So you've got to use sulfate-free shampoo and conditioners to maintain the keratin treatment. Keratin treatments are a game changer for curly, kinky, coily, big, fat, textured hair because it allows us to nourish and reform the curl pattern without actually breaking and damaging, and it nourishes all throughout the process. You can use a keratin treatment on top of anything. You can apply keratin on top of bleach, on top of relaxers, on top of cold waves, or on virgin and damaged hair. It will always feed and nourish the hair if the stylist knows what she's doing. If she's a true master stylist, then he or she can use keratin to control textured hair. We can show you how. Come visit us at beautywellnesshaircare.com.